tell you about my best friend. He's a warm-hearted person who loved me till the end. People, let me tell you about my best friend. He's a one-boy, cuddly toy, my up, my down, my pride and joy. People, let me tell you about him. He's so much fun. Whether we're talking man to man or whether we're talking son to son, 'cause he's my best friend. Yeah, he's my best friend. La la, ba da 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 ya, ba da 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 ba, ba da 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 ya, ba da da dee dee, bo bo ba, rubba da ba dee, bo ba, rubba da ba dee, bo ba ba.
Coming to you live from our top secret broadcasting bunker here at 1233 American Legion Drive. I was going to change the songs on you, the little TV show theme song that I like to play. I like TV theme show songs. I have to admit, I like that. I was going to change that. I'd pick that one out, and I thought, that's cute. I like that one. I remember watching that show when I was a kid. That was the, in case you didn't recognize that was the courtship of Eddie's father. But anyway, after reading some of the news that I've got pulled up here today, I was going to play Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. The debt deal has been passed by the Senate here in the United States, America. And it's big headlines. Everybody's watching the news. Everybody's wondering what's going on. People are now no longer afraid that people are going to be dying in the streets because the debt deal. And here's the thing, and I dealt with this in a Watchman video broadcast when I first came back from Kenya. That was on my heart and on my mind, dealing with the budget crisis that we face in the United States of America and how, it's plainly written out in scriptures. We have all these fat cats up in Washington that are spending all of this money. And they're spending it on lobbying groups. Now, this is an interesting story that came across. I'm here at drudgereport.com, and there, it's big headlines here. One article says, just a first step. Senate approves debt hike. Stocks skid. Reid vows to raise taxes. Threat of downgrade still looms. And what it is, in case you haven't been paying attention, is that the United States, by law, can only borrow so much money, and then they have to stop. And the Democrats and liberals and even some of the Republicans was wanting to raise the debt ceiling, and then there were some Republicans who were probably just acting like they didn't want to do that. And I say acting like, and I say that for a reason. But there was this big fight going on, and you would like to think that maybe some of our politicians in Washington, D.C. actually care about the country. They care about the American people. They care about our future and the fact that our grandchildren are going to inherit all of this debt. They're just going to be loaded with it. Somebody's going to have to pay the bill sometime. And our grandchildren probably are going to be the ones if things if things roll along slowly. Now, if they speed up, we'll get stuck with it. You would like to think that some of the politicians in Washington, D.C. actually care about the country and care about what's going on. But I have a feeling, I have a gut feeling, and if you've seen me stand up before, you understand that when I have a gut feeling, that's a monster feeling. That's a huge emotion that I have. I have a gut feeling about two things. Number one, I think probably a lot of this going on back and forth between John Boehner and Harry Reid and Barack Obama, I think it was a lot of there's an election year coming up posturing. I think that has a lot to do with it. On both sides of the aisle, the conservative and the liberal, I think there was a lot of posturing, and I think that some of the speeches and some of the statements that were made are going to look good on a political ad somewhere, and so the politician can say, I was against this, or I was for this. That's what they like to do. So that's my first gut instinct about all of this, and I say that I really believe that in a lot of this that was being argued back and forth, it was just a charade. And here's one of the articles why. This just came out in National Journal today. I have it up on screen. Debt ceiling deal sets off lobbying frenzy. The so-called super committee that would be responsible for cutting $1.5 trillion from the federal deficit is poised to create a new class on K Street. That is the super lobbyist. Within 14 days of the debt ceiling compromise becoming law, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, and House Speaker John Boehner and Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi must each appoint 3 members to a bipartisan panel of 12 lawmakers tasked with goring sacred cows. Now, that is an expression used to define things that are in the American budget that nobody wants to get rid of, like Medicare, Medicaid, welfare pay. Usually it has to do with entitlements of some kind, the government doling out money to people. That's usually what it has to do with. The scale of cuts is immense, the article goes on to say. Let's see here. When the divine dozen are named, it will lead to, quote, the emergence of a pack of super lobbyists who will have access to those members and who can try to protect clients from the carnage, said Democratic consultant David DiMartino. That's because with only 6 members from each party on the committee, influencing the super committee will largely be an inside game with Democratic and Republican lobbyists working for their respective lawmakers. And I don't know if you understand the game. I get it. I understand the game that's being played in Washington. They get the votes from us. But the influence doesn't come from us. It comes from the lobbyists. It comes from very, very large, very well-funded political organizations, political action committees, people with influence. They call them lobbyists because in the old days, these were guys who would stand out in the lobby of Congress and wait for the senator or the congressman to walk out and say, hey, let me talk to you about some new bill that we want. Let me talk to you about some political favor that we need. That's why they're called lobbyists, and they're lobbying firms. Lobbying is probably the single most productive industry that Washington, D.C. has, and there are even right-wing political so-called Christian lobbying groups. I remember back in the 80s, Jerry Falwell sponsored the Christian Coalition, and big lobbying, but raised millions of dollars from conservative Christians all over the country to feed these people and house these people and give them big salaries so they could try to influence politics in their direction. But just about every industry, just about every interest in this country has a lobbying firm in Washington, D.C., and when it comes to cutting the budget, it's not going to be based upon who needs what or who can do without. It's going to be based upon what these lobbyists are pressuring these congressmen to do. And you need to understand that the reason why so much money has to go into lobbying firms is that these lobbying firms then, in an election year, they will take money and they will stick it in politicians' re-election campaign fund. And the truth of it is in this country, if you don't have a lot of money to run for an office, you're not going to get elected. That's pretty much how it works nowadays in this country. This is far removed from the idea that our founding fathers had in mind. And usually about every 4 years, every 6 years, something like that, some congressman, whether in the Senate or the House of Representatives, tries to come up with some sort of bill that says, hey, we need to change how this is done here. These lobbying groups have too much power, and politicians have too much power, and we need to change this, we need to correct this. And it all sounds good. Until it comes time to vote, then all of a sudden nobody votes on the thing, and there's nothing changing, there's nothing being done in the country because the people who benefit the most from these laws not being changed are the congressmen. So they're not about to vote away their own power. They are always going to vote to give themselves more power. That's just how it is. And so that's my first gut instinct about this new bill. Now, my other gut instinct and I was expressing this concern to Gary before the program today, that I said, they've spent a lot of time on the news talking about debt ceiling, talking about cuts in the budget, talking about Barack Obama and John Boehner not getting along, and they've spent a lot of time talking about this thing. What they haven't done, what nobody knows, the House of Representatives has just passed a bill. Now the Senate has passed, I would assume, a version of that bill that's very similar. And then it goes on to the President of the United States, and he can either veto it or sign it. And I don't know what he's going to do. But anyway, my gut instinct says that something this big, something this important, is sort of like with all the health care legislation and all the, if you remember back in 2009 with the bank bailout bill, somebody, somewhere along the line with this bank bailout bill that was this national crisis, and if I stop and think about this. It seems like every law that's signed in our country, that's passed in our country, has something to do with some big catastrophe that's going to happen if we don't do this the right way. And so in 2009, right about the time we began the Watchman video broadcast, they were talking about, oh my goodness, children are going to be dying in the streets, and there's going to be martial law, and there's going to be soldiers, and the Russian and Chinese are going to invade, and it's going to spell doom and gloom if we don't give all the banks in this country, especially the ones that misspend all of our money, if we don't give them all this money and bail them out. And so in that law, they injected a little thing, and it had nothing to